The Texas housing market stands on the edge of transformation, a quiet storm building beneath the surface of the Lone Star State's skyline. For years, homebuyers, developers, and policymakers have wrestled with an uncomfortable truth. Texas, long seen as the land of open opportunity and affordable living, is now facing a housing crisis that threatens that very image. In cities once defined by endless sprawl and low costs, Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, the affordability gap has widened beyond expectation. Rents have surged, property prices have climbed, and families once certain they could plant roots in Texas now find themselves caught between rising costs and shrinking options. Yet, amid the tension and uncertainty, a new wave of change is beginning to rise. It started quietly in the halls of the state legislature, a policy designed not as a patch, but as a reimagining of how Texas grows. Senate Bill 840, a piece of legislation signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott, promises to shift the very structure of Texas's real estate market. By allowing non-residential land, from empty office towers to abandoned retail plazas, to be converted into multifamily housing without requiring cumbersome zoning changes, the state is unlocking a new era of rapid, adaptive development. For decades, developers complained that zoning bureaucracy slowed progress and inflated costs. Now, those barriers are set to fall. This is not just a law, it's a signal, a declaration that Texas is willing to evolve. The bill goes into effect on September 1, 2025, and experts are calling it a game-changer. It will allow cities to breathe new life into their underused commercial spaces, transforming them into vibrant communities where people can live, work, and walk, all within the same footprint. Office spaces that once sat empty after the pandemic could soon become homes for families. Old retail centers, stripped of their tenants by e-commerce, might soon hum again with the sound of new residents instead of silence. But as every major shift brings opportunity, it also brings uncertainty. Investors are watching closely, and city planners are recalibrating their visions. The winds of change do not sweep evenly. Some communities may thrive under this reform, while others may struggle to adapt. The balance between affordability and overdevelopment remains delicate, and the months ahead will test whether Texas can pull off the rare feat of expansion without exclusion. 4. The people on the ground, the families, the renters, the small developers trying to survive in an unpredictable market, this legislation feels like a promise. A chance to reclaim the spirit of Texas as a place where building a future is still possible. The question that now lingers in the warm Texas air isn't whether the winds of change are coming, it's how strong they'll blow, and who will be standing when the dust finally settles. At the center of Texas's unfolding real estate revolution lies Senate Bill 840, a legislative heartbeat pulsing with ambition and controversy alike. This isn't just a reform bill, it's a blueprint for reshaping the physical and economic DNA of Texas's biggest cities. The law cuts deep into the traditional barriers that have long governed where Texans can live, how cities expand, and who gets to benefit from that growth. Signed by Governor Greg Abbott and set to take effect in September 2025, SB 840 redefines what urban development truly means in a state that has long prized independence and innovation. The core idea of SB 840 is deceptively simple but profoundly powerful: take what already exists and make it livable. For decades, vast stretches of Texas's cities have been locked behind zoning laws that separated commercial and residential life. Office districts would sleep at night while suburban neighborhoods would stir miles away, forcing long commutes, clogged roads, and endless infrastructure strain. SB 840 dismantles that separation. It gives developers the right, by right, as the law phrases it, to convert non-residential land, such as office buildings, warehouses, or retail centers, into mixed-use or multifamily housing without enduring the exhausting process of rezoning approval. This change, experts argue, is revolutionary because it shifts the power dynamic. Previously, developers had to negotiate, plead, or compromise with municipalities to gain permission to reimagine their projects. Now, that negotiation is largely gone. The law simplifies, accelerates, and democratizes development, a move that trims an average of 18 months from project timelines. It's an invitation for developers to move faster, invest sooner, and deliver more housing in places already equipped with utilities, transit access, and community infrastructure. But SB 840 doesn't stop at easing conversion. It goes further by stripping away restrictive limits that have quietly shaped how high and how dense Texans could build. Cities can no longer enforce excessive parking requirements or height restrictions that have historically discouraged multifamily construction. The new standard sets a clear minimum: municipalities cannot require more than one parking space per dwelling unit, must allow at least 36 units per acre, and must permit building heights up to 45 feet or higher if existing codes allow it. In essence, the bill lifts the invisible ceiling that has kept many urban areas from vertical growth. This approach reflects a growing recognition that Texas's housing shortage can't be solved by expanding outward alone. The old model, endless suburban sprawl, is running into physical, financial, and environmental limits. SB 840 encourages cities to grow inward instead, breathing life back into empty downtown offices and hollowed retail centers. It's an urban renaissance framed in law, one that could bring more walkable neighborhoods, revive struggling business corridors, and help restore affordability for a population increasingly priced out of homeownership. Yet, as transformative as it sounds, SB 840's promise carries weighty implications. The freedom it grants developers is immense, but so is the responsibility that follows. With fewer municipal checks and fewer zoning debates, cities will have to trust that growth will remain balanced and sustainable. It's a bold experiment, a test of whether Texas's deep-rooted belief in limited government can coexist with the urgent need for housing reform. In its essence, SB 840 is not just about bricks and zoning codes, it's about redefining how Texas envisions community, opportunity, and the future of its urban heartlands. If Senate Bill 840 is the blueprint for Texas's housing future, then its true test will unfold in the cities that define the state's identity: Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio. These metropolitan powerhouses are not only economic engines but also the laboratories where the next phase of urban living will take shape. Each one carries its own challenges, ambitions, and opportunities, and together, they form the front line of a movement that could transform how Texans experience home, work, and community. Austin, the state's tech capital, sits at the epicenter of this transformation. For years, the city has been both a beacon of innovation and a symbol of skyrocketing housing costs. Once hailed as a haven for young professionals, Austin's median home prices doubled within a decade, pushing many residents to its outskirts. SB 840 arrives here like a much-needed release valve. Developers now see potential in the empty downtown offices vacated after the remote work boom. Spaces that once hosted startups and software engineers could soon host families and renters, reshaping the urban core into a mixed-use ecosystem, where residential life and business coexist seamlessly. In Dallas-Fort Worth, the conversation is different but equally pressing. The Metroplex has no shortage of land, yet rapid population growth has outpaced housing supply. Many of its suburban areas, originally zoned for commercial expansion, now stand half-empty, a remnant of overbuilt retail plazas and fading strip malls. SB 840's provisions could give these spaces a second life. Developers envision turning those dormant lots into compact residential districts with modern infrastructure and walkable layouts, echoing the national trend of repurposing underutilized land into thriving communities. The goal here is clear: turn yesterday's retail overbuild into tomorrow's residential opportunity. Houston, on the other hand, stands as an urban wildcard. Known for its flexible zoning and sprawling layout, it has long been a city that does things differently. Yet even Houston, with its reputation for growth and affordability, faces pressure. The city's commercial vacancy rates have climbed, and storm recovery costs have weighed on budgets. SB 840 could help Houston reimagine its flood-resilient urban planning, encouraging housing projects in safe, accessible commercial zones that already have strong infrastructure. It's not just about convenience, it's about strategic resilience. San Antonio, meanwhile, represents the balance between tradition and expansion. With a strong cultural identity and a slower pace of growth, the city now sees a chance to modernize without losing its character. Historic areas near downtown could be revitalized through adaptive reuse projects that align with the new law, transforming old warehouses, markets, and industrial districts into sustainable, community-centered housing. Across all these cities, SB 840 isn't just policy, it's the spark for a renaissance in how Texas defines livability. From abandoned offices to bustling neighborhoods, the next generation of Texan cities will rise not from new land, but from the bones of what already exists. The change begins here, in the heart of these evolving urban landscapes, where tomorrow's Texas is being built today. While most headlines about Senate Bill 840 focus on its potential to solve Texas's housing shortage, there's another story quietly unfolding beneath the surface, the story of developers, investors, and builders who now find themselves standing before one of the most transformative opportunities in decades. For these players, SB 840 is not just a housing bill, it's the green light for a construction and redevelopment boom that could redefine profit models, reshape skylines, and spark a wave of competition unlike anything Texas has seen since its last major oil rush. Developers across the state have long faced a frustrating paradox: massive demand for housing but bureaucratic barriers that made it nearly impossible to build fast enough to meet it. Rezoning processes could stretch for months, sometimes years, driving up costs and scaring off investors. But now, with the passage of SB 840, that bottleneck is breaking open. The law gives developers unprecedented freedom to repurpose existing commercial properties, think vacant office towers, closed department stores, and empty retail plazas, into multifamily or mixed-use housing without waiting for local approval. Suddenly, the state's real estate landscape is alive with possibility. The timing couldn't be more significant. Texas's major urban centers, Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio, are all sitting on vast inventories of underused commercial real estate, much of it a byproduct of the post-pandemic shift to remote work and online retail. What was once seen as a liability is now being reimagined as a goldmine. Developers who were once forced to build outward are now looking inward, targeting prime city locations with ready-made infrastructure, water, power, transportation, already in place. This eliminates one of the most expensive aspects of new development, land preparation. Large-scale real estate firms are already drafting redevelopment plans that would have been impossible just a year ago. In Dallas, for example, several developers are evaluating how to turn struggling shopping centers into walkable residential communities complete with restaurants and co-working spaces. In Houston, aging office parks are being considered for affordable housing developments, while Austin's high-rise conversions could attract the kind of mixed-income diversity the city has long lacked. But the benefits of this boom extend beyond big corporations. Smaller, regional developers, those previously priced out of the major urban market, now have an entry point. With reduced legal hurdles and faster turnaround times, they can compete by focusing on mid-size projects or niche markets, such as senior housing, student apartments, or sustainable eco-communities. For them, SB 840 levels the playing field in a way no previous legislation has. Still, with every opportunity comes risk. Overdevelopment, market saturation, and the potential for quality shortcuts loom as real threats. Analysts warn that while the law removes friction, it doesn't remove responsibility. Developers who chase short-term gains without considering long-term livability could trigger new issues of oversupply or declining neighborhood value. Yet, for now, optimism is high. Texas stands at the beginning of what many economists are calling a boom within the boom, an internal surge of innovation within the broader real estate cycle. SB 840 has given developers the rare gift of flexibility and speed in a state already known for ambition and scale. As cranes rise over city skylines and blueprints turn into communities, one thing is clear: Texas developers aren't just adapting to change, they're leading it. While lawmakers and developers are celebrating the sweeping possibilities of Senate Bill 840, the story looks very different from the ground level, where homebuyers, renters, and everyday Texans are navigating the shifting realities of a market still finding its balance. For them, the Texas housing market in late 2025 feels like standing in the middle of a seesaw, hope on one side, hesitation on the other. Affordability is improving in some places, but prices and interest rates still loom large. Inventory is growing, yet competition for quality homes remains fierce. In short, optimism is cautious, because every bright spot seems to come with a shadow. According to a recent survey by the Texas Realtors Association, buyers are split in their confidence. A majority agree that more homes are becoming available, particularly in suburban and newly redeveloped areas, but nearly half also believe those homes are still out of financial reach. The affordability index, though improving, continues to reflect the challenges faced by first-time buyers and middle-income families. In cities like Austin and Dallas, even with declining prices, the average home remains far above what most young professionals can afford. For these buyers, the promise of SB 840, that new, repurposed properties will bring down costs, feels hopeful but not yet tangible. Many buyers also express uncertainty about the quality and type of housing that will emerge from the new wave of redevelopment. Office-to-apartment conversions, while efficient, often result in unconventional layouts, smaller units, and limited outdoor space. Renters and buyers alike are questioning whether these new options will meet their expectations for comfort, family living, and long-term value. Some fear that Texas might end up with an oversupply of small, high-density housing that serves investors more than residents. On the other hand, a new class of buyers, investors, remote professionals, and relocators from high-cost states like California and New York, sees opportunity where locals see volatility. For them, even a slightly declining market in Texas looks like a bargain compared to their home states. They're taking advantage of the cooling prices and expanding inventory, especially in secondary cities like San Antonio and Fort Worth, where demand remains strong but competition is manageable. This influx of external buyers is stabilizing the market in some areas but adding pressure in others, keeping local buyers on edge. The emotional tone of the market, too, has shifted. Gone are the frantic bidding wars of 2021 and 2022, replaced now by a quieter, more calculated atmosphere. Buyers are taking their time, comparing neighborhoods, and negotiating harder. Sellers, in turn, are adjusting expectations, offering concessions, lowering prices, and even covering closing costs to secure deals. At its heart, Texas's housing market feels like it's in transition, not collapsing, not soaring, but recalibrating. The passage of SB 840 has planted seeds of hope, yet those seeds are still sprouting unevenly across the state. For many Texans, the question isn't whether more homes will be built, but whether those homes will truly be within reach. The market's future may look bright on paper, but on the ground, buyers are still walking carefully, waiting to see if this new era of reform will finally open doors that have been closed for far too long. The Texas real estate market in mid to late 2025 is moving again, not with the frenzied, unsustainable energy of the pandemic boom, but with a steadier, more deliberate rhythm. After months of stagnation, the numbers are beginning to shift in ways that signal renewed life and cautious optimism. Home sales are ticking upward, inventory is expanding, and mortgage rates, while still higher than buyers would like, have inched down just enough to spark movement. The result is a market that feels like it's finding its footing again, one careful step at a time. According to the latest data from the Texas Real Estate Research Center, home sales across the state rose modestly through the summer of 2025, marking one of the first sustained increases since 2022. The total number of closed transactions jumped between 3% and 5% across major metropolitan areas, a small but meaningful improvement that hints at regained confidence. Austin, long the bellwether of Texas's housing trends, saw one of the strongest rebounds. After nearly 2 years of price corrections, its market has finally stabilized, drawing back both local and out-of-state buyers who had been waiting on the sidelines. Inventory, meanwhile, is expanding faster than expected. Builders who paused projects during the interest rate spike of 2023 and 2024 are now returning to the field, encouraged by policy shifts like Senate Bill 840 and a more predictable lending environment. The number of active listings statewide has increased by over 10% year-over-year, a signal that supply is catching up with demand. This is especially true for entry-level and mid-tier homes, categories that had been nearly non-existent at the height of the housing crunch. In places like Dallas-Fort Worth and San Antonio, more affordable subdivisions and townhome projects are finally hitting the market, offering relief to buyers who had long been priced out. But the story isn't uniform. While the lower and mid-range sectors are gaining traction, the luxury market is cooling. High-end homes that once sold in days are now sitting for weeks, even months, as affluent buyers adopt a wait-and-see approach. The shift reflects a broader national trend: the era of runaway appreciation is over. Sellers, once in control, are now being forced to negotiate. Price reductions have become increasingly common, especially in neighborhoods that saw explosive growth during the pandemic. The dynamics between buyers and sellers are slowly balancing out. The frantic bidding wars of 2021 have been replaced with measured conversations, inspections, and fairer deals. Buyers have regained leverage, and homes are selling closer to their listing prices rather than tens of thousands above. Realtors describe the current climate as a return to normal, though with a distinctly modern twist: technology-driven transactions, remote home tours, and growing interest in adaptive reuse projects made possible by SB 840. Momentum is building again in Texas, but this time, it's grounded in stability rather than speculation. The market's motion reflects a new kind of maturity, one shaped by lessons learned from the last few volatile years. As homes move, deals close, and cranes rise once more, Texas stands at the threshold of what may be its most balanced housing cycle in over a decade. The frenzy is gone, but the movement is real, and it's gaining strength with every passing month. For years, Texas's real estate market seemed immune to gravity. From 2019 through the pandemic boom, prices soared at a pace that stunned even seasoned analysts. Buyers flooded in from across the country, fueled by remote work and record-low mortgage rates, sending home values skyrocketing in markets like Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, and Houston. But as 2025 unfolds, that pendulum has begun to swing the other way, slowly, steadily, and in some places, sharply. The once unshakable rise of Texas housing prices is giving way to a new phase: correction under pressure. Statewide data paints a clear picture of recalibration. The median home price in Texas has fallen by roughly 3% to 5% compared to the previous year, a modest decline on paper, but a meaningful one given how resilient the state's market had seemed. In Austin, the correction is even more pronounced. After reaching unsustainable highs during the pandemic, prices in the capital city have dropped nearly 10% from their 2022 peak. The city's luxury sector, which once attracted tech workers and investors from California, is now cooling fastest, leaving sellers facing longer listing times and increased negotiation. Dallas-Fort Worth, the state's largest metro area, tells a more balanced story. Prices there have softened but remain relatively stable, buoyed by steady population growth and corporate relocations. Homeowners are adjusting expectations, trimming asking prices slightly to meet a more cautious wave of buyers. Houston, meanwhile, stands out for its resilience. Despite minor dips in some neighborhoods, the market has maintained a surprising level of equilibrium, driven by its diverse economy and historically flexible zoning laws that keep construction flowing. San Antonio, long considered the most affordable major city in Texas, continues to attract first-time buyers, keeping its market competitive even as others cool. The underlying causes of this price correction are layered. Rising mortgage rates since 2023 have dampened purchasing power, pushing many potential buyers to the sidelines. At the same time, the influx of new housing supply, especially from projects made possible under Senate Bill 840, is beginning to relieve the pressure on limited inventory. Builders who once held back are now racing to complete developments, contributing to an environment where buyers have more choices than they did 2 years ago. Yet, this isn't a crash. Economists describe it as a controlled descent, a natural balancing act after years of overheated growth. Prices aren't plummeting, they're normalizing, realigning with income levels and lending realities. For buyers, this shift represents opportunity. For sellers, it's a wake-up call. The age of name your price is over. Homes must now justify their value through quality, location, and realistic pricing. Still, not all pressure is downward. In regions with strong job growth, like North Texas and the energy corridor near Houston, demand remains resilient enough to prevent deep price cuts. Investors and institutional buyers, too, are circling back, eager to capitalize on moderate declines before the next upswing. The pendulum may have swung, but it hasn't stopped. What Texas is witnessing is not decline, it's correction, the natural exhale after years of rapid inflation. The market is breathing again, recalibrating its rhythm. And as the pressure builds for balance rather than record-breaking highs, one truth stands firm: the Texas housing story isn't ending, it's simply entering its next, more sustainable chapter. Every great reform carries within it both promise and peril, and Senate Bill 840, while celebrated as the dawn of a new housing era in Texas, is no exception. Beneath its bold vision of streamlined development and urban revitalization lies a web of challenges that could quietly reshape its outcome. For all its ambition, the law's success hinges not only on what it enables, but on how carefully cities, developers, and state regulators manage its ripple effects. The devil, as they say, is in the details, and in the case of SB 840, those details could determine whether Texas experiences a sustainable housing renaissance or an uncontrolled urban sprawl cloaked in progress. One of the most pressing risks revolves around infrastructure. By granting developers the right to convert commercial zones into residential ones by right, the law effectively bypasses some of the oversight traditionally held by local governments. While this speeds up development, it also raises serious concerns about whether existing infrastructure, water, sewer systems, roads, and schools, can handle the sudden influx of residents. A former office complex might be easily transformed into apartments on paper, but if it sits in an area without adequate public transit or utilities, the burden shifts to local municipalities to catch up after the fact. Some city officials worry this could strain budgets and increase maintenance costs, leaving taxpayers footing the bill for unplanned growth. Then there's the issue of quality and livability. Office-to-housing conversions may sound practical, but the reality is often far more complicated. Many older commercial buildings were never designed for residential purposes. Their layouts lack natural light, ventilation, or outdoor spaces. Developers rushing to capitalize on the new law might prioritize quantity over comfort, creating housing that technically meets code but fails to foster real communities. Urban planners fear this could result in a patchwork of sterile, poorly integrated developments that erode neighborhood cohesion instead of strengthening it. Another concern involves market distortion. The very speed and freedom SB 840 provides could lead to oversupply in certain areas, particularly in cities like Austin and Dallas, where developers tend to move aggressively once new incentives appear. An uncontrolled surge in multifamily projects could push vacancy rates higher, driving short-term price drops that may hurt smaller property owners and investors who lack the resources to weather volatility. If too many units hit the market at once, Texas could see a miniature boom and bust cycle unfold within its urban cores, an unintended consequence of good intentions. Lastly, the bill raises questions of local control. Critics argue that SB 840 sidelines municipalities by reducing their authority over zoning and design standards. While this promotes statewide uniformity, it risks stripping communities of their ability to shape development in line with their own cultural and environmental priorities. SB 840's brilliance lies in its simplicity, but its weakness lies there, too. Without careful coordination, oversight, and urban foresight, the same law designed to fix Texas's housing shortage could inadvertently sow the seeds of new problems. The opportunity is immense, but so are the stakes. The coming years will reveal whether Texas can master the details, or be undone by them. Amid all the policy shifts, legislative reforms, and market forecasts, the true heartbeat of the Texas housing story lies with its people, the everyday Texans trying to buy, rent, or simply hold on to a place they can call home. Behind every statistic and price chart are real families balancing dreams against dollars, hope against hesitation. The housing market might be evolving on paper, but on the ground, it's still deeply personal, a daily test of patience, resilience, and adaptation. For first-time homebuyers, the current market feels like a maze of mixed signals. Prices are easing in several cities, but not enough to make homeownership easy. Even as Senate Bill 840 promises a flood of new housing through redevelopment and conversion projects, those benefits haven't yet reached most working families. Many are still contending with down payment hurdles, high mortgage rates, and inflation-driven living costs that erode their savings each month. For them, affordability isn't just about the listing price, it's about whether they can keep their financial footing once the keys are in hand. Take, for instance, young professionals in Austin or Dallas who earn decent incomes but remain locked out of ownership because starter homes are scarce. They've watched from the sidelines as investors scoop up newly built or renovated units for short-term rentals or long-term appreciation plays. Even with prices dipping slightly, bidding competition persists for well-located, mid-priced properties. The result is a growing divide between those who can buy and those who must wait, a divide that, ironically, continues to widen even as new housing supply emerges. Renters, too, face a complicated landscape. While the pace of rent hikes has slowed, few have seen meaningful relief. Many are caught between the rising costs of renewing leases and the uncertainty of whether they'll find a better deal elsewhere. The promise of SB 840, more multifamily units and adaptive reuse housing, gives renters hope for future stability, but skepticism lingers. Some wonder whether these new apartments will truly be affordable, or whether they'll cater to higher-income tenants under the banner of urban renewal. Then there are longtime homeowners, the quiet backbone of Texas communities, who are experiencing a different kind of stress. Their property values have risen dramatically in recent years, boosting equity but also driving up property taxes. Many older residents, especially those on fixed incomes, now feel squeezed by the very market that once symbolized prosperity. They see shiny new developments rising nearby and wonder whether Texas's growth still has room for them. The emotional reality is that Texans are both hopeful and weary. They've weathered rapid appreciation, economic uncertainty, and now, a wave of regulatory change that could redefine their neighborhoods. For some, the path to homeownership feels closer than before, for others, it feels more elusive than ever. At its core, this isn't just a story about policy or profit margins, it's about belonging. The question haunting many Texans today isn't whether more homes will be built, but whether they'll be able to live in them. The state's next housing chapter will be written not just by laws and developers, but by the people who dream, save, and strive for a place in the Texas they love. As Texas stands on the brink of a new housing era, the next few years will serve as the ultimate test, a test of vision, execution, and balance. Senate Bill 840 has already rewritten the rules of real estate, but the story of its success or failure will depend on what happens after the ink dries. The law has set the stage for transformation, now it's up to the state's cities, developers, and citizens to determine whether that transformation becomes a triumph or a cautionary tale. The road ahead is paved with both opportunity and uncertainty. On one side lies the potential for a housing boom unlike any in recent history, one that could finally close the affordability gap, modernize Texas's cities, and attract even more residents and investment. On the other side are the risks of imbalance, overdevelopment, rising infrastructure strain, and the erosion of local character. The tension between progress and preservation will define this next chapter. The early signs are promising. Construction permits are rising again, redevelopment proposals are stacking up, and investor confidence has returned to the state's major markets. In cities like Austin and Dallas, long-stalled projects are being revived, fueled by the newfound flexibility SB 840 provides. Builders are moving faster than ever, converting commercial zones into mixed-use communities that blur the lines between living, working, and leisure. The very shape of Texas's urban environment is beginning to shift, taller, denser, and more integrated. For a state once synonymous with sprawl, that shift represents a fundamental change in identity. Yet, as the cranes return to the skyline, the question remains, can Texas grow without losing what made it great? Cities are now racing to adapt local codes, public transit systems, and environmental policies to keep pace with rapid development. The success of SB 840 will hinge on whether infrastructure, planning, and community well-being can evolve alongside construction. If they don't, the result could be congested roads, strained utilities, and social fragmentation hidden beneath a veneer of progress. Equity will be another defining challenge. The law's promise of increased housing supply will mean little if affordability doesn't follow. Policymakers must ensure that the new wave of development includes housing for all income levels, not just sleek, high-rent apartments in revitalized districts. The opportunity to correct Texas's affordability crisis is real, but so is the risk of replacing one imbalance with another. Economists and realtors agree that 2026 through 2030 will reveal whether SB 840 achieves its purpose. If successful, Texas could become a model for modern housing reform nationwide, a state that turned its challenges into catalysts. If not, it could serve as a warning of how good intentions can falter without foresight. Ultimately, Texas's housing market is not just an economic story, it's a reflection of the state's identity: bold, ambitious, and unafraid to take risks. The coming years will prove whether that boldness pays off. The blueprint is written, the tools are in hand, and the foundation is being laid. Now, as the dust of reform settles, the question lingers in the air: will Texas build wisely, or just build fast? The answer will define not just its skyline, but its future.